Hey, what's up, family? YouTube families, Friday, you made it. Give yourself a pat on the back. And let's go ahead and get into some of this good old content. This is going to be part two to the video I made about the black people of the Pacific Islands. So this will be the second part, and I'm going to create a third part because the chapter is so long. And there's a lot of information in this chapter in regards to the black people of the Pacific Islands and black tribes of the Pacific Islands that don't get enough attention. You don't hear about these people enough. You don't see these people enough. Well, guess what? I'm here to correct that issue. I want to bring these people to the light because people have such a narrow view of black people that they think that everybody's just from Africa. Everybody came over here on boats and that was it. Well, we're going to correct that terrible, disrespectful narrative. And we're going to talk about all the black tribes of this earth, of this world, of this planet, whatever you want to call it. We want to shine some light on these people because they deserve to have the light shined on them. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We want to specifically be talking about the Fiji people. Fiji is an island nation in the South Pacific, comprising over 300 islands in Melanesia. Its largest island is Viti Levu, or Great Fiji, where most Fijians live today. According to the oral tradition of the indigenous people of Fiji, legendary warrior Chief Lutenasabosaba led his people across the seas to the new land of Fiji. From where, though? One textbook on Fiji reports most authorities agree that people came into the Pacific from East Africa or Southeast Asia via Indonesia. The legend of Chief Lutenasabosaba is more specific. The Fijians say he sailed from Lake Tanganyika in East Africa via the Rufiji River that crosses Tanzania. They arrived on the west coast of Viti Levu. The chief was immortalized as Degiji, the supreme god of Fiji, and his people moved inland into the mountains. Today, the Fijian government recognizes this origin story as historical fact, and most Fijians trace themselves back to their African ancestors, Lutenasabosaba. In one of his many commentaries on the global black diaspora, historian Runako Rashidi describes his experience in Fiji. I found Fiji to be a tropical paradise, and the Fijians turned out to be some of the most beautiful black people that I've ever encountered. In fact, much to my delight, the brothers and sisters in Fiji, dark-skinned black people who wore big natural type hairstyles, didn't merely identify themselves as black, but said that they came from Africa and said it was great pride. What a refreshing revelation. In Fiji, needless to point out, I felt right at home. These black folk were just my kind of people. What Rashidi says next is of incredible value to all of us who want to travel abroad. As a matter of fact, the brothers and sisters in Fiji that I met seemed as interested in me as I was in them. Believe me when I say that if there is one thing that I excel in, it is in asking questions. I asked the Fijians all kinds of questions about exactly what part of Africa they came from, when they got to Fiji, how they got there, what their present living conditions were like, what was their relationship with the recently arrived Indian population, how did they feel about white people, the nature of their oral traditions, myths, and religious beliefs, male-female relationships, diet, health, other Pacific Islanders, general projections about the future, and just about everything that I could think of. They never got tired of answering my questions and had quite a few for me also. They told me that the most two well-known African Americans were Reverend Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali. Of course, they knew about Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and most of the major African American sport figures. One Fijian brother, a businessman that I met in the lobby of a luxury hotel, told me how proud he was of the brothers and sisters in America and how much African Americans had advanced the cause of black people around the world. I asked the Fijians how often they encountered black people from the United States. They replied that African Americans frequently came to Fiji for holiday vacations, but that I was indifferent and that I spent a lot of time with them and wanted to know all about them. The Fijians always referred to me as brother and singled me out for special treatment. We drank kava together, an extremely important Fijian tradition, and really bonded, and I met people who looked like all the black folks that I've ever known. In fact, one village chief physically seemed to be almost a twin brother of Dr. John Henrik Clark. When I told him of the resemblance, he seemed to be extremely pleased and insisted that I come and sit next to him. Now we're going to speak on the Solomon Islands, and these are the islands where you will find black people who have blonde hair and blue eyes. Very interesting. I know you've heard of it, but now you're going to hear about them specifically. The Solomon Islands are important to our discussion of the black presence in Pacific Islands because they reveal to us yet another case of the startling diversity found among indigenous black populations. You see, many of the people of the Solomon Islands look just like black people everywhere in the world, except they have blonde hair. For centuries, it was thought that early European settlers, like Captain Cook's crew, must have contributed their genes to the island's native women, and that's where all this blonde hair came from. But recent genetic studies have revealed that the blonde hair genes of Solomon Islanders is different from the blonde hair genes found in white Europeans. Of course, the black version of the gene is older, but it's totally unrelated to the white version, showing us that there were separate developments. This is just one of the many instances where we find every imaginable trait found in the world among black people. Very, very interesting, because when they talk about how to describe black people, they always say big lips, big noses, dark hair, black hair, brown eyes. That's this, they have a lot of people have a very narrow view on how they see black people. But as you just read, there are many variations among our people. We are a nation, all right, a separate nation that has many tribes inside of our nation. So without further ado, let me go ahead and move on. Micronesia isn't all well known, as its most popular siblings, Melanesia and Polynesia. Well-known parts of Micronesia include Guam and the Marshall Islands. The Micronesian culture was one of the last native cultures to develop in the Pacific. It is the byproduct of a mixture of Melanesians, Polynesians, and Filipinos. Because of this mixed heritage, many of the ethnicities of Micronesia feel closer to some groups in Melanesia, Polynesia, or the Philippines. So who are the Polynesians? Well-known parts of Polynesia include Hawaii, New Zealand, Samoa, the Cook Islands, and Easter Island. Historians argue that the Polynesian islands were settled no more than 5,000 years ago, and Melanesian or Australians never sailed that far. There really isn't strong archaeological evidence for settlements more than 5,000 years old. But how did Australian-looking people arrive in the Americas over 20,000 years ago if they didn't pass through the Polynesian islands? It's a question worth investigating. In Ethiopia and the Origin of Civilization, John G. Jackson says the Asiatic black men were not confined to the mainland, and quotes Sir Harry Hamilton Johnson, who wrote, "In former times the Asiatic Negroes spread. We can scarcely explain how, unless the land connections of those days were more extended through eastern Australia to Tasmania, and from the Solomon Island to New Caledonia, and even New Zealand to Fiji and Hawaii." Here's what we know so far. Recent linguistic studies suggest that the most recent waves of black migration into Polynesia, hailing from South China and Vietnam, encountered mixed communities already there. These communities were a mix of Austroasiatic / Austronesian speakers from Taiwan and non-Austronesian speakers from Melanesia. In other words, the linguistic evidence also suggests that the original people made it past Melanesia into Polynesia. In 1870, Thomas Huxley observed, as linguistic evidence leaves no doubt that Polynesia has been people from the West and therefore possibly from Indonesia, it becomes an interesting problem how far the Polynesians may be the product of a cross between the Dayak Malay and the Negrito elements of the population of that region. I'm inclined to think that the differences which have been over and over again noted between the elements of the population in Polynesia and notably in New Zealand may be due to such a mixed origin of the Polynesians. According to Alfred R. Wallace, the brown Polynesians were much more nearly related to the Papuans than to the Malays, and should therefore be classified as Negroid instead of Mongoloid. Wallace found the Polynesians to carry themselves like Africans and Negroid Papuans, with great energy and humor, as opposed to the more somber demeanor of Australoid people. Wallace maintained that the typical Polynesians were fundamentally Negroid with a considerable Mongoloid intermixture, and not originally Mongoloid with a Negroid intermixture. Others have argued that the Negroid element came later, an issue we'll discuss in part 2. Earlier in this book, we discussed Paleo-Mongoloid people. One example of a Paleo-Mongoloid people still living today may be the Samoans. Physical anthropologist Louis R. Sullivan considers Samoans Mongoloid, but says their features present a slightly different evolution since the time of their separation and isolation from their parental stock. Sullivan notes that the retention of features like wavy and woolly hair that have been lost in other Mongoloid types. In other words, Samoans still have the original black traits their ancestors had, minus the neo-Mongoloid traits found among other populations. Perhaps this explains why Samoans share genes with Australian Aborigines. These black genes may also help to explain why Samoans are one of the most maligned populations among Polynesians. Samoans are seen as warriors, criminals, and a ton of other bad things. When we consider how much they look like black people, it makes sense. And if you think the Samoans have it bad, wait till you hear the story about the Maori. Now will be that right there what I just told you, the Maori people of New Zealand. That's going to be on part 3. I'll give you guys enough information. So I don't want to get you guys too off into this information where you're kind of like nodding off and you kind of get bored. But I mean, this is great information, guys. And, this information deserves to be put out there. People deserve to know about these black populations in other parts of the world, because the media, they're not going to show you. They're only going to show you what they want to show you about black people or black populations that they believe that they want to show you that don't exist. But they exist. They're here. They may not be in the same state they were in when in the beginning of their existence, but they're here and they have a history, and it deserves to be told. If we're going to tell history on parts of the world where there's not much melanin, then we should tell history on parts of the world where there's a lot of melanin. So that's all I got for you for this for today. I'm going to probably drop some more content later on today, but I just wanted to bless you guys with this one. Part 2, part 3 is coming probably later on today. So, hey, I hope you guys have a great Friday. Hope you guys had a great week. Enjoy your weekend. It's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. And yes, there's black people in Nebraska. I'll see you in the next one.